Many. Chair recognizes the honourable member for Fox Hill.
Mr. Speaker, the takeaway that I have from all of the statements made here this afternoon and this evening, including the statement that was just made by the statements made by the member before me, is the question of balance. So essentially, all members have argued that in every public policy in connection with, in this particular case, the matter of the labor laws, there ought to be balance. There ought to be a balance struck between the rights of workers and the rights of employers. And it is the responsibility in the scheme of things for the Ministry of Labor and ultimately the Cabinet to be able to strike this balance. So what has been attempted here in these two pieces of legislation is precisely that, to strike the balance. And sometimes the matter tilts to some extent toward labor and other times toward the employer. In my experience as an attorney, I found more often than not that employees are at a severe disadvantage when they are faced with a powerful employer. And part of the mischief that these bills is designed to cure is precisely that particular problem, which is to redress the balance and to give an equality between the strength which an employer has and the strength which an employee has when they reach before a particular tribunal or when they're seeking to negotiate union agreements.
Member, just pause for a moment.
Member for Fox Hill.
And this happens on many occasions. That the one that I most remember is when you appear before a tribunal, you have to wait ages and ages for the case to be heard. Then when the case is being heard, once the case is being heard, you don't get a decision, and if you get a decision, you can't enforce the decision. And the employer has superior resources, so they appeal on a point of law to the Court of Appeal, and that's another hole down which it goes, and the matter is never resolved. So the question is balance. And it's a very difficult thing to strike, and I think you have to congratulate the Minister of Labor for having the courage to bring this, knowing that all the things we've heard today about the term coming to an end, and knowing that there are a certain set of employers who, no matter what you do, will start screaming like Chicken Little that the sky is going to fall, that the economy is going to collapse, that the country is not going to move forward. The most recent example, of course, was when the minimum wage was proposed. People were screaming to the rafters that the economy was going to grind to a halt because the minimum wage was raised. Sometimes the government has to intervene, and sometimes you have to brave your way through it, even though you may know that it's going to be a difficult passage. And I think that's what happens with this. The first I heard there was going to be any controversy in relation to this was, I'm trying to take my collection into St. Agnes, and as I walk around the back, one of the members who serves around the altar let me have it. What are you all trying to do? You're all trying to bring the economy to a halt. You all need to change course. You haven't consulted. We haven't seen this. We don't know what the provisions are, and so on and so forth. Speaker, I asked myself, I said, I wonder if we did change course, if we did amend it, if we did consult, when you brought the bill, I wonder if you would not still hear the same noises, that the sky is going to fall, the world is going to come to an end, the economy is going to grind to a halt. So I think at a certain point, you just got to move ahead. And I think what the minister proposes, he'll say when he comes to the wrap-up, is that there is some consultation going on, and there will be some more consultation tomorrow. But the idea is to bring this to some finality so that we can move ahead, because those are the principles on which we fought, and we want to be able to go to the electorate saying that we have accomplished this fact. So I think the right balance has been struck. I'm comforted by the fact that the minister has indicated that in 95% of the cases, I believe is what he said, this will not affect employers, because it only affects employers who decide that they're going to create redundancies. And if you never create redundancies, then the matter does not arise. So I certainly support it. And I want to also say that part of that group of people that scream from the rafters always that the sky is going to fall, that the world is going to come to an end, that the economy is going to grind to a halt, is one Dionysia de Aguilar. Now, I raise that name because that's one of the quotations that we heard from earlier. And you got to say that this is a gentleman who sat on a board of directors and made a decision without letting the government know in advance to bankrupt the company by using a foreign court. And so you have a company which went into bankruptcy last year. They blame the government for the bankruptcy. But the fact is their board of directors sat and determined to go to an American court and bankrupt the company. And that would have been the second time that that company could not pay its bills. The first time they defaulted to the Bank of Nova Scotia. The second time they defaulted to the Export-Import Bank. The question is, when you see them shouting from the rafters and seeking to blame the government for what happened, you ask yourself, how is what happened with their decisions in Bahama any different from the person, the woman, man and wife who lived in my constituency today, who could not afford to pay their mortgage at the Royal Bank of Canada, and the Royal Bank of Canada just foreclosed on them and put them out of the house and sold the house. That's what happened with Bahama. They couldn't pay their bills. They could not pay their bills on 2 occasions. And the company went into bankruptcy. The government intervened to rescue the company, to look out for the Bahamian interests, for the Bahamian workers. You had a man who had the temerity to name people citizens of Bahama. They're only citizens of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
That's right.
No citizens of Bahama. This is utter nonsense, rubbish. And you see this all the time. I run into this all the time, Mr. Speaker, as the Minister for Immigration. I'm completely at one with the comments of the Member of Parliament for Tall Pines with regard to the need for the government to intervene to protect in these situations where, in cases of foreign direct investment, there is this feeling that you can be, because you're here, because the Bahamas government needs employment for its citizens, that you can act in an abusive fashion toward employees. This is a serious complaint coming out of Malia, for example. And there are several complaints which the Department of Immigration is now investigating, some of them, most of them in connection with the Department of Labor, to get to the bottom of this kind of abusive behavior. And unfortunately, the blunt instrument of immigration authority has to be used to govern this kind of abuse. So the same way the Member of Parliament for Tall Pines goes into Malia. Every time I go there, the Member of Parliament for Long Island says that she goes to Malia. But those employees speak to me and say, what is immigration going to do? But you know, as I hear all these stories about the sun is going to set and the world is going to come to an end and the sky is going to fall, I remember Mitch Hanna, who used to be the Deputy Prime Minister of this country. He told me shortly after the Progressive Liberal Party took over in '67, there was a strike by the hotel union over at Paradise Island. And the then owners of Paradise Island, came to this new government, new PLP government, and said, they'd just come into power, and said, look, if you don't sort this out, we're going to close the hotel down. And Hannah told them, they'll close the hotel then. Just close the hotel. There comes a point when a country has just got to take a stand. And you know what happened is they didn't close the hotel. They're not going to close the hotel. But people may threaten to do various things, but at a certain point you've got to stand up for this country. Now, so I happen now, several years later, to sit in the seat of those people who were my predecessors, men like Loftus Roca, men like Arthur Hanna, who sat in the seat, Carlton Francis, who were all ministers of immigration, and never once wavered to exercise their power as ministers of immigration to ensure that the Bahamian interests were protected. Today, the atmosphere has changed, the international atmosphere has changed, and so actions are no longer taken in such a peremptory fashion. But I just want to assure Bahamians again that I understand what it means to say we believe in Bahamians. I don't understand, and I said it here, I said it around the cabinet table, why people who do these agreements with governments of the Bahamas feel the need to say we need to bring in X number of foreign employees. I don't think that that's something that needs to be reflected in an agreement. Because the principle of immigration policy in this country is this. Whether or not you, and I've said this as Minister for Immigration, and, you know, anyone, I say to people, you know, you have an immigration board to which the minister answers. And if you don't like his decision, you could go and appeal it to that board. But so long as I sit there, here's my position. Regardless of what is in an agreement, the fact is that you must meet the test, and that is, are there Bahamians available for these jobs? And if a Bahamian is available for the job, then the Department of Immigration is not going to issue the work permit. That's me. And we don't do it on ourselves. We get it from the Department of Labor. They're the experts. People go to the Department of Labor, and, you know, there's always this thing about waiving labor certificates. Tell you this minister doesn't agree with that. So everybody goes, and you must go to the Department of Labor, and the Department of Labor will specify whether or not the skill is available in the country or not. Now that's me. Okay? I've said there are lots. So I've said about these complaints in the banking sector, in the hotel sector, in the tourism sector. And right now we've started a practice after the Department of Labor goes into a place. So if you as an employee, you complain to the Department of Immigration about abuse by a foreign employer, someone who's a work permit holder, here's what happens as a matter of practice. The first thing is we refer the matter to the Department of Labor. The Department of Labor goes in and investigates the complaint. The Department of Labor gives a report back to the Department of Immigration. And we then act upon the advice of the Department of Labor. Now, the advice of the Department of Labor, when we get it, it's not preemptory. The first thing that happens is the Department of Immigration sends what we call a precautionary letter to the employer. And that letter indicates to the employer that we have gotten a complaint and a report has been done. And that report indicates that this may rise to the level of the revocation of that work permit. So we're giving you an opportunity in a reasonable amount of time to correct the problem by seeking someone yourselves to replace that employee. If, however, you do not do that, the next step is we will act. And that's how we do it. And I think that that's the best way to give everybody the same matter the Member of Parliament for Tall Pines was saying, this question of balance. And this has been done in the case, one case was public, in the case of the manager at Memories in Grand Bahama. We're working on a number of issues at another hotel in Grand Bahama, at another industrial complex in Grand Bahama, but we're always sensitive to what the member for Tall Pines was talking about, what the member for Long Island was talking about, striking a balance between the economy having to succeed and the rights of Bahamians in their own economy. And it's a difficult balance to strike, but it's the government's job to be able to strike it. But I think that everyone ought to know that every minister on this side understands, believes in Bahamians, and also believes Bahamians must come first. That's our job, and we adhere to it assiduously. Now, the other thing which I've said to people who live in my constituency who often complain about, you know, foreigners are able to do this and so on and so forth. I said, citizens of this country ought to recognize that they have a responsibility too. This idea that a member of parliament comes along every 5 years, or so they say, and once he lands in your house, you dump every problem in the world upon him. There's this fault, that fault, the next fault, everything. Everything is wrong. And then the member of parliament leaves your house. I guess you breathe a sigh of relief. You elect him, and you complain when he comes back that I haven't seen you in 5 years. Got an office, got a this, got a next, all the rest of it. And I say, with public policy problems, citizens have a responsibility also to check with the member of parliament. When the government was trying to move a particular policy in this House recently, through the cabinet made a decision that it was important to adjust the pricing point on the cost of permanent residence in this country. That's just one example. We said the threshold should be moved from 500,000 to $1 million. We said that the cost of permanent residence should be increased from 10,000 to 25,000. That's what we said. Because right now, all you have to do is invest in a property of 500,000 in this country. Apply, and that investment grounds your application for permanent residence in our country for the princely sum of $10,000. And here's the argument. We say, if you're a managing director of a bank, managing director of a hotel, you pay $12,500 for that work permit for 1 year. And yet, you can pay $10,000 for a lifetime entitlement to live in this country. Something's got to be wrong with that. Desperately wrong. And so the pricing point has to be adjusted. And I said to communities that I visited earlier this year, I went to Stanyuki, went to Black Point, went to Ragged Island. And in each community, I pointed out to them that there are tens of thousands of people who want to live in these places. Because when you look at the places, you'll see that you're actually living in paradise. I mean, these are beautiful places beyond measure. And people want to come there. And what we have to be sure is that we don't undersell what it is we are giving to people who come here. So people are actually buying the right to stay in the Bahamas, which is a place that has sunshine 300 days or more a year. The temperature is even around, it's called the Isles of June. That's what we're selling. Bright, clear water. You could go out and fish. You have no one interfering with you. This is what we're selling. And we're giving it away for $10,000 a pop. Someone can come here for $10,000. You know, the Foreign Secretary of the UK came here. He spent one night in Freeport. And after the next morning, as I see him off at the airport, he said to me, I said, how was your visit here? He said, it was great. We stayed up beyond 1 o'clock. He says, you have no idea what it is for us to be able to come here and sit outside in our own place, sit outside until 11, 12 o'clock in the night and not have to be concerned about the weather or anything, and it's just so beautiful. He says, you have no idea. So that's what people want to come here for. And I'm saying, let us not sell that short by giving it away at too cheap a price. We're not an industrial country. We're not an industrial giant. What we are selling is our services and the beauty of the place and its serenity and calmness. So that should not be undersold. Nor should we shortchange ourselves on it, nor should we be apologetic about it. But what I said to the citizen who was talking to me is that what shocked us was the only people who responded to this were the real estate agents, who said, oh no, the sky is going to fall, the economy is going to grind to a halt, you can't do that, so on and so forth. I mean, not suggestions about, well, okay, why don't you, put it in 3 months, so at least those people that are grandfathered, we can get those in. Nothing like that. But the larger picture isn't seen. And so citizens themselves ought to take it upon themselves to get more dynamically involved in the general governance of this country. And that's why I want to come to trade unions. I served as the opposition spokesman for labor and immigration for the years 1997 to 2002. And again for the years 2007 to 2012. So while we were in opposition, labor was my portfolio responsibility. And I made the point, I'd come from practice in labor law, so I knew the trials and tribulations of employees and their difficulties with employers. I'd also come from a background in my training in public administration about the value of trade unions. It's not only, and I make this point here, it's not only the value of what trade unions do for individual employees in raising their pay. For example, I've often argued that hotel workers would be completely disadvantaged if they didn't have the hotel workers union. Completely disadvantaged, because the hotel employers are so powerful in relation to employees. So the hotel union is responsible for the value which we now put in hotel workers in this country, that they have a decent living, and that must be protected. So it's not only the individual, but it's not only the individual value that trade unions had. They also are an important aspect of our democracy. Because when you have aggregations of people who are in association together, they can represent particular points of view which can move the country in a particular direction. And you saw this at its most extreme when Eric Williams was the Prime Minister of Trinidad. George Weeks is a man who was a very powerful trade union leader. And at a time when there was a collapse of the opposition in Trinidad and Tobago, it was the trade unions that was able to keep Dr. Williams on his feet and to move Trinidad forward as a project. When you had military rule in Ghana, similarly, it was the trade unions that kept the military government on its feet. When there were no political parties being able to run the country and to ameliorate or to find that balance between the rights of workers and the general rights. So I determined then that for those two reasons, and for the government of the Bahamas had to support trade unions and to make sure that those trade unions survived. They were important not only for the individual support and value they brought to the workplace, but they were also important for the more general democracy in our country. And this project, this particular set of legislation carries that a bit farther. I was with Sir Lyndon Pinling when he was able to get agency shop through the PLP Council. It was opposed many times. And I remember him sitting and talking on the phone, and he said, at last we've got our council to agree to agency shop. And that came. And people again said, the earth is going to fall away, the sky is going to fall, the economy is going to grind to a halt. But here we are, the country is still surviving and is still moving forward. And that's what every generation has to do. We have to carry the project forward, and we have to keep going forward. And sometimes, you know, people are going to disagree with us, but we mustn't be hesitant to take what is sometimes a tough decision. When you look back on it, you can say to yourself, I did the right thing when I had the opportunity to do that thing. I had the power to do it. And I didn't do it because it was going to affect me in the elections. I did it because that was the right thing for us to do.
That's right.
To move the project farther along. So any person, now, you know, there's this, the member for Fort Charlotte was saying, you know, everything has an equal and opposite reaction. I also have another thing from physics. Nature abhors a vacuum. And what that means in this context is, people who say that employers are going to walk away and so on and so forth. I remember once when the man who owns Super Value announced that if VAT came, he was going to close down his shops. That's what he said. I believe he said that. I remember seeing that somewhere. The Super Value was going to close down if VAT came, right? Yeah, going to close down Super Value. And I said to my colleagues jokingly, I said, you know what? If Super Value closes, I will resign my seat tomorrow and go into the supermarket business. Nature abhors a vacuum. That's my point. My point is nature abhors a vacuum. So what I'm saying is if that shop closes, someone will see an opportunity and move into that opportunity. Someone will calculate the costs and say, okay, the government may have put some additional costs, but you know, you will find a way to make money. People have to eat. They have to go to the supermarket and buy food. So you'll find a way. So don't come threatening me about you can close down a business. Don't come doing that. It doesn't get to that. You know, all you have to do is to say, look, I have some concerns. Let's work together to see if we can ameliorate the concerns. But the first thing is, oh, if you do this, I can shut down my business. Come on. I mean, this is the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. You know, this is a civil polity. We're going to go around threatening people. We're going to have an election in this place in less than 12 weeks, I would guess. I would guess. Yeah, the mandate runs out on the 23rd of May. Okay, so in short order, there'll be an election. And if the past is any predictor of the future, the election is going to be fine. You know, I see citizens running around so frantic as if the world is going to come to an end because an election is going to take place. Election? It come and go. The sun will shine the next morning and the world will go on.
That's right.
You know, there's nothing to it. And I say to voters, you know, this isn't a messianic exercise. You know, this is just about choosing the government. It's a simple exercise. When I voted for the first time when I was 18 in 1972, right? The election that chose independence. And man, I was so excited about this. Man, I'm going to vote for the first time. So I go in the thing. It took less than 30 seconds. I mean, just, that was that. You walk out of the booth. That was that. What do you mean how I voted? I mean, you see we're an independent country.
What?
So I was on the side of the majority. You know, I was on the side of the majority. So all I'm saying, sir, is again, let's, I'm on putting some balance in all of these things. I support the bill. I think the unions need this help. I think employees need this help. It may be some discomfort at first, but I think we need to stick to the project and make sure it keeps going forward. And, you know, there's this expression, the usual suspects. And they're only playing to the gallery now because election is coming themselves. You know, talk about socialism and communism. I tell the Aguila, go sit down. Fucking fool. You know? Right now, they're about to build a new supermarket out east. You think they can close that down? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Talking about socialism. Yeah, what do these fellas think this is? This is a sensible electorate. And the electorate is going to vote on the principles of parties which support their interests. We think that party The greater party is the Progressive Liberal Party. That's where we're going to go, and we're going to try and market ourselves for continuity of governance,
Yes.
for the continued support of the ordinary people of this country. We're not perfect, I said it before, warts and all. But that's what the Progressive Liberal Party is going to fight for in this election. And if Diaghilev and all the rest of those who are his fellow travelers want to go backwards, that's their business. Forward ever, backward never.